drives. Fade away. It's a three. It's off the iron. Offensive rebound. Clark. Lob. Morant with the punch.
But you see here, off the offensive rebound, look at the setup.
Why do the Grizzlies' highlights look particularly entertaining? How do they maintain competitiveness despite missing key players at the start of the season? And how do their rotation players seem to perform very well? What's the biggest change for the Grizzlies this season? All these point to one direction: the Grizzlies' new offensive system. Simply put, the Grizzlies underwent major changes in their assistant coaching staff between last season and this season. Reportedly, 5 assistant coaches left, and 6 new ones were hired, meaning more than half of the staff changed. Among the new assistant coaches, 2 are frequently mentioned, including Tuomas Isalo, who serves as the lead assistant coach, and Noah LaRoche, who primarily works mainly as a player development coach. The Grizzlies' new offensive system is connected to these assistant coaches. They weren't simply hired for reference purposes. For example, Tuomas Isalo was specifically brought in to participate in strategy development. So these assistant coaches have real influence on the team's strategy, and we could briefly mention them here. Tuomas Isalo is the one shown interacting with Ja Morant in the footage. He was previously the head coach of Paris in Europe, helping Paris win the Eurocup championship. During his tenure, Paris's offense was notably aggressive, reportedly reaching new heights. So Tuomas Isalo is a coach with strong offensive expertise, and his primary role with the Grizzlies involves tactical development while holding the title of lead assistant coach. For instance, when the Grizzlies played their first game against the Lakers in November, Jenkins was absent, and Tuomas Isalo served as the acting coach. His style in Europe featured very fast pace, effectively utilizing quick guards, and his tactics involved more screens, some using slip screen to attack, others like seal screen to create space for ball handlers. Under such fast pace, players often have opportunities for improvisation, so his players need basketball IQ to make various in-game decisions. The other assistant coach, Noah LaRoche, mainly focuses on player development. Before his assistant coach position, he primarily worked as a trainer for players like Westbrook and Duncan Robinson, helping them with their training. His primary approach involves helping players train their off-ball movement skills and spatial awareness. One of his characteristics is that he prefers reducing set plays, replacing them with principles of play and decision-making. There are fewer predetermined plays, and instead, players learn how to respond and make decisions in various situations. So his player development isn't just pure skill development, but coordinates with the overall tactical system. The Grizzlies front office and coach Jenkins wanted to add variety to their offense, so they brought in Tuomas Isalo to provide main tactical vision, and Noah LaRoche to guide players how to move and utilize space within this new offensive system. Of course, not just these two, but other coaches, including retained assistant coaches, are also involved in the system. It's just that they're less frequently mentioned. Therefore, the Grizzlies' new offensive system isn't simply copying any single coach's approach but rather becomes a kind of fusion. Jenkins still leads the overall direction, primarily maintaining his original transition offense framework, but the offense beyond that has more variations than before. These changes can be observed externally in several key aspects: first, fast transitions; second, trailer utilization; third, cut and drive arrangements; and fourth, reduction of set plays. We'll first discuss each briefly and then examine what's behind them. The first change is fast transitions. The Grizzlies' fast transitions aren't just about the point guard or ball handler pushing the pace, but when they really need to run, there might be 3 or 4 players advancing. Like in this play where Ja Morant pushes quickly, the Wizards send 4 players back to defend the paint, but if you look back, the Grizzlies still have 3 or even 4 players running, including Jay Huff. After the ball handler advances, even if they can't score immediately, there will be various opportunities from the trailing players, like open 3-point shots or follow-up attacks on the rim. This style of fast transition with multiple players not only pressures the opponent's defense but also provides the Grizzlies with more offensive options. When players like Pippen Jr. or Jalen Wells push the transition, the offensive threat remains significant because many players are running. You don't need to be particularly strong at attacking the rim to push the pace, just pushing forward can trigger various changes. This is a characteristic of the Grizzlies' transition game. The fast transition also leads to the second point, trailer utilization. Because of the fast pace and high willingness to attack the rim by both ball handlers and off-ball players, defenders often crowd the paint first. At this time, the Grizzlies' trailing players coming back to the three-point line usually find more space and can make various plays, such as three-pointers, screens, or cutting when opportunities arise. The Grizzlies have big men like Jaren Jackson Jr., newly acquired Jay Huff, and Santi Aldama, all with three-point shooting ability. The coaching staff this season seems to encourage, if you have three-point ability and you're trailing back, when the defender doesn't come out or you feel you have enough space, you can choose to shoot. Even Edey has already taken several such trailing three-pointers, and the results seem quite good. For those with less obvious three-point ability, like Brandon Clark or sometimes Edey, they might directly set screens for the ball handler when they come back. This means they don't necessarily have to go to the paint and then circle back for half-court sets, they can initiate offensive coordination as soon as they return. You'll notice this creates a spatial dilemma. During transition offense, if the opponent's interior defenders stack in the paint, they might not be able to chase out to the perimeter for the trailing wave. If they stay outside, the paint becomes more vulnerable. At this point, it becomes easier to drive or make off-ball cuts. This is how the Grizzlies aim to fully utilize the nature of transitions and trailers. These 2 points, fast transitions and trailer utilization, if we think about them more carefully, we'll find they're part of a larger system. The core concept is that the Grizzlies are trying to extend fast break advantages into half-court situations. There would be an opportunity during the initial push, another during the trailer phase, and these opportunities often come when the defense is more likely to be confused, unlike in set half-court positions. If they can capitalize on the first step, it affects the defense and carries these advantages into subsequent offensive actions. For example, in half-court sets, openings might need to be created through running plays, but if you're trailing back and already at the three-point line, that's an immediate opening, eliminating the need for complex plays and saving time. The Grizzlies are trying to extend various fast break advantages into subsequent offensive actions. This is because in previous seasons, their half-court offense wasn't very good, mainly relying on transition offense. But when it came to true half-court positioning, they didn't have as much advantage. This season's new offensive system partly aims to strengthen the Grizzlies' advantages in half-court situations through this approach. Then we come to the third point. In the Grizzlies' current offensive system, you'll notice many cuts and spatial movements. These cuts are more frequent and widespread, to the extent that they seem to have become a regular offensive tool. These cuts and spatial movements have some characteristics, with the most special being, we all know you can cut when no one is driving, but when someone is driving, you should cut even more, or the team should arrange for someone to roam around the paint. At this point, you might think it seems a bit strange, a bit counterintuitive, right? Cutting when someone is driving, won't the paint get crowded? Won't it bring defenders in, too? But if you watch the Grizzlies' offense, you'll find it's quite interesting. Simply put, the Grizzlies regularly have one player besides the ball handler roaming around the paint or preparing to cut into the paint. This player usually moves to the opposite side of the driving teammate. This creates a space that, although not very large, puts the opponent's interior defender in a dilemma. Should they guard the ball handler or the off-ball player? Not defending the basket means giving up easy 2 points, which is quite a threat. You'll notice the off-ball player near the basket draws the interior defender's attention. If they focus on the off-ball player, they can't fully help defend against the driver. More often, their attention is drawn to the driver, leaving them unable to watch the off-ball player. The Grizzlies arrange this off-ball player for multiple purposes. First, it adds another person to chase offensive rebounds. More importantly, this player serves as a form of support, a core concept in these arrangements. If the driving player's layup opportunity is blocked, and there are no teammates open on the perimeter, or passing lanes to the outside are covered, instead of forcing a tough shot, they can pass to this player who can then make subsequent plays. This characteristic means Grizzlies drivers don't necessarily need to beat their defender one-on-one to initiate a drive. Having interior support and various opportunities if the initial drive doesn't work, essentially encourages everyone to drive. You'll notice this season various Grizzlies players are driving, like Kennard frequently taking the ball inside. In other words, if you think you can draw the defense, just drive. If you can't score, don't worry, we have support. So drive with confidence. Because the initial drive draws defensive attention and pulls defenders, the cutter gets opportunities, perimeter players get opportunities, and players in the dunker spot get opportunities. So it's not limited to only players like Ja Morant who can beat defenders one-on-one. In fact, you'll find Ja Morant using this kind of two-man interior game more often. This season has seen many brilliant passes, especially when opposing help defenders often face the dilemma of whether to guard Ja Morant or the off-ball player. Therefore, the Grizzlies' cutting system actually has three functions: cutting, offensive rebounding, and support. When someone drives, the Grizzlies' perimeter players also move. Some say their pattern is collective clockwise or counterclockwise movement, but the court situation changes instantly. So in practice, they're more like moving wherever there's space, wherever they can create space or draw defenders, as perimeter players try not to cluster together. Therefore, it's not always very regular, but what's certain is that when someone drives, it's a timing opportunity for the Grizzlies' off-ball players. If you want to cut or move on the perimeter, that's an opportunity. This roughly describes the Grizzlies' changes to cutting this season. Finally, the fourth point is the reduction of set plays. The Grizzlies rely less on clearly defined set plays for offense, instead relying on players using their basketball IQ to make judgments and plays on the court. This was particularly evident at the start of the season, as it was somewhat like a complete rebuild state, with everyone first practicing their on-court feel. Gradually, as the season progressed, more elements might be added, including screens or some shooter-related tactics. However, the general tone should continue to be players making plays on the court themselves. That is to say, Grizzlies plays might start through certain initiations, like setting an initial screen or designing off-ball movement on the other side. But after these initial one or two steps, it becomes players adapting to the situation on their own. This relates to the previous 2 points about transitions and trailers. Transition and trailer utilization mean your attack starts earlier, you're already doing overall offense during the transition offense, while set plays usually involve getting back to half-court, everyone getting into position before running plays. So if you're going for a more boundaryless offense, you won't necessarily regularly use set plays. Combined with the previously mentioned cutting and movement system, you'll find that the Grizzlies, except for a few advantage points, often don't rely on one-on-one isolation plays or contested shots. They more often seek easier baskets through player movement on the court. If you can create defensive confusion through each transition or various cuts, including movement during drives, you don't need many set plays. So the Grizzlies' offense has more of an opportunistic nature and requires more player improvisation ability. Sometimes, you'll even find some players setting impromptu screens for others during play. The Grizzlies have also reduced some overly complex tactics because sometimes you'll find that all that screening and running around produces similar spacing effects to simply moving in space and making simple coordinations on the court. So this season, you'll find while the Grizzlies might seem to lack signature plays, they still somewhat get open shots. This represents the Grizzlies' shift this season toward spatial and defensive manipulation rather than set plays. Like the following play is an interesting example. In this play, Kornet was ready to double-team Jaren Jackson Jr., but because of Brandon Clark's threat at the basket and Jalen Wells' threat on the perimeter, White couldn't stay camped in the paint to help defend. So White returned to the perimeter, and Kornet retreated, which actually reduced the pressure on Jaren Jackson Jr., making it easier to score. Another play like this is clearly not pre-designed but improvised. These kinds of plays are quite common in the Grizzlies' offense. This is the Grizzlies' reduction in set plays, transformed into more fluid offense and defensive manipulation. Combining all these points, we can talk about what the Grizzlies are actually doing here and what philosophy lies behind it. Some people say it's motion offense, and it indeed feels that way. However, the Grizzlies still have their special characteristics. For example, first, as we mentioned, the Grizzlies are trying to extend some fast break advantages into half-court situations. Previously, the Grizzlies were good at transition offense but weren't as strong in half-court offense, which could become stagnant. This season, the Grizzlies actively use transition and trailer advantages to prevent situations from becoming rigid one-on-one half-court offensive and defensive sets. This element, combined with the Grizzlies' extensive cutting and spatial movement, you'll find they're included in a larger concept. That is, the second point, the Grizzlies want to make all types of offense more like opportunity basketball rather than half-court sets. This means the Grizzlies are trying to prevent situations from becoming rigid. As chaos reigns, opportunities arise. The more chaotic the court situation, the easier it is to cut, and the perimeter is also more likely to have openings. When the defense becomes confused, you can score more efficiently. So you can also notice that the Grizzlies rarely take mid-range shots this season. Their shots are concentrated in higher efficiency areas, near the rim and open three-pointers. The Grizzlies encourage all types of players to drive. Because driving not only has higher efficiency shot near the rim but also tends to create more chaos. The Grizzlies strongly encourage creating chaos because it draws defensive attention. In this chaos, there's another notable characteristic: it relies less on players' individual isolation abilities. You might say, don't the Grizzlies have Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.? Of course they can still isolate when needed, but these one-on-one plays, these star players' energy consumption, can be saved for tough situations. If you can first take advantage through chaos, then use chaos first. So you'll notice that this season Ja Morant's forced shots have decreased while creative passes have increased. This is because his passing opportunities have increased in chaotic situations. This style of relying less on individual player ability and more on court positioning and adaptation, along with the previously mentioned cutting system partly serving as support for drivers, produces an effect of threat distribution. This is one of the main purposes behind the Grizzlies' entire setup. That is to say, we don't need Ja Morant-level finishing ability to score. You can get opportunities through cuts, and you can try driving because you don't necessarily need to beat your defender one-on-one to drive. This season, you see players like Kennard, Jalen Wells, or LaRoche all driving. As mentioned before, driving will trigger movement throughout the space. If you get stuck, then the players around the paint or cutting will support you, and the perimeter players will also have spatial movement, making it easier to pass. So you can have more aggressive offensive actions. And many Grizzlies players get offensive opportunities through methods like cutting. You'll find that this way, every Grizzlies player carries a certain offensive threat. Reflected in the statistics, this season the Grizzlies stars have fewer explosive scoring games, fewer 40-plus point games, but the Grizzlies often have multiple players scoring in double figures, and team assist numbers are high. When some key players are injured or resting, you'll find the Grizzlies still maintain competitiveness, rather than falling apart and tanking for lottery picks. More interestingly, many rotation players sometimes perform even better. This is because the system distributes offensive threats more evenly across all players. So, when players grasp the team's cutting and spatial movement concepts, they can score in relatively easy ways. This threat distribution is the coaching staff's improvement over previous seasons. Before, the Grizzlies' offense often relied on stars trying to beat their defenders while others watched, resulting in lower offensive efficiency. This season's adjustments both reduce dependence on stars and make the overall offense more aggressive. At this point, you might think this system sounds great, right? But it's not without issues. It has several particular characteristics. First, it heavily relies on basketball IQ. While chaos creates opportunities, the offense can also become chaotic. How do you ensure the Grizzlies have the advantage? The Grizzlies' turnovers actually have increased this season, though their assists, shooting percentage, and pace have also increased. The key comes down to whether players can make good decisions in chaotic situations, so this system really needs players with high basketball IQ. Fortunately, the Grizzlies don't have much problem in this area. During the Kleiman era, draft selections have prioritized basketball IQ, making it almost a prerequisite unless a player's talent is exceptional. Additionally, the Grizzlies have a psychological advantage. Their players all know they're running this system, and through coaching and long-term adaptation, they've come to expect and try to benefit from this chaos. Opposing teams, who don't play this way all season, might not be as prepared. Second, it heavily depends on teammate chemistry and requires adaptation. When players return from long-term injuries, they might need time to adjust, as this offensive style requires adaptation. During the regular season, the Grizzlies also give playing time to various players, allowing most to adapt to this system. So if there are more injuries or trades, we can expect another adjustment period, including for players like G.G. Jackson or Vince Williams Jr. when they return. The third point, most importantly, is whether this system can work in tough situations, especially in the playoffs when defenses are more intense. At such times, trying to get easy baskets through cuts might not be so easy. However, it's also reasonable to expect that the Grizzlies will supplement this foundation with additional tactics, including some specifically for tough situations. This season, what the Grizzlies fear most in tough situations is reverting to old habits. Everyone becoming hesitant to attack, returning to their previous rigid offense. This system needs not just stars but everyone's participation to maintain threat distribution. That's why you'll find players like LaRoche are invaluable. Among non-stars, he'll still try various drives even in tough situations, because drives activate this system. If players become afraid to attack and revert to old habits, the system can't function. Currently, in the regular season, reverting to old habits usually marks the beginning of a loss. You'll notice that the Grizzlies' advantages are mostly built through this system. When they revert to old habits, it's like living off past games. If the previously built advantage isn't exhausted before the game ends, the Grizzlies win. If it is, they lose. It's unclear whether tough situations force them to abandon this system and revert to old habits, or if reverting to old habits makes situations tougher. However, one thing is certain, it creates a negative cycle. This system has another benefit. Even in regular use, it allows stars to conserve energy for tough fourth-quarter situations. Like Ja Morant, this season you'll notice he has more energy for defense. As for Jaren Jackson Jr., he's doing many things, not just expending energy on defense. He is actually very strong in isolation this season. So now Ja Morant can play defense, and Jaren Jackson Jr. can handle tough scoring situations. How far the Grizzlies can go depends on how the team handle tough situations, especially in the playoffs. Finally, let's summarize. The Grizzlies' 2024-25 season offense emphasizes transition, driving, cutting, and spatial movement. Set plays have decreased while improvisation has increased. Through better fluidity, encouraging player drives and team coordination, they try to achieve threat distribution. Behind this system, there are actually more concepts and hidden ideas. However, let's first see if the Grizzlies can handle tough situations. If they can, we then could discuss the more advanced concepts behind it. This covers the main aspects of the Grizzlies' new offensive system in the 2024-25 season. That's all for this video. See you next time.